Calling out doctors' claims, Professor David Lai speaks to the big story, refuting calls to halt vaccinations for youths in Singapore. Checking for possible cases, residents of HDB blocks at Henderson Crescent and LENGKOK BAHRU are undergoing mandatory swab tests. And more charges have been filed against this Singaporean businessman who is linked to a billion-dollar fraud scheme. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Dima. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. The benefits of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines continue to outweigh the risks. Well, that's according to Singapore's Expert Committee on COVID-19 Vaccination and Senior Infectious Diseases Specialist David Lai from NCID, who have called out claims by a group of local doctors behind an open letter arguing for a halt in the vaccination of adolescents here. The letter, posted by Dr. Koh Kwang Po, was said to be written on behalf of many concerned pediatricians, physicians, specialists, surgeons and GPs. It came after a 13-year-old American boy died days after he received his second dose of a COVID-19 vaccine in the US. In a revised statement issued today, the Ministry of Health said that reports about the child's death did not state heart failure as a cause, as alleged in the open letter, and the matter is still under investigation. Now, in his Facebook post, Associate Professor Lai said that it is the same small group of doctors who are once again misleading and misinforming the public, noting that 3 of the doctors were involved in an earlier letter calling for children to be given traditional COVID-19 vaccines instead of mRNA ones. He stressed that in the face of a more transmissible Delta variant, it is imperative that we protect our children from severe COVID-19 and its complications. Prof. Lai joins me now to share more. Professor, welcome back to the show. With US authorities still investigating whether COVID-19 vaccine caused the death of an American boy, it's perhaps understandable that Singaporean parents of teenage boys and some doctors here would be concerned about the safety of vaccines and feel there's no need for the rush to get vaccinated. Professor, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Haryanto. Now, we do not yet know the cause of death in this unfortunate single case in the US. But it's important to remember that the US CDC data clearly shows that the majority of the patients with myocarditis associated with mRNA vaccines have a very mild illness and recover very rapidly, which is not similar to other causes of myocarditis. And additionally, it's very rare, 1.6 per 100,000. And so it's important to put in perspective. Now, I have to say that our Ministry of Health has been very transparent as well. On the 11th of June, it has issued a statement advising the public what to do in this situation. Now, there's a false comfort currently that our children are safe. It's important to remember that we've protected our children by very aggressive test, trace, and isolate, and many of us have adhered to safe distancing and mask wearing. However, with the arrival of the Delta variant, we should remember that only a month ago or so, there is many schools have to shut down because of the tuition center cluster. So clearly, our children can be affected by COVID-19. Now, if a lot of children are affected by COVID-19, even though the risk of severe COVID is low, some will end up in intensive care and a few will die. So this is the key point. We want to protect our children from this occurrence. And this will happen a lot more than 1.6 per 100,000 if COVID-19 spreads rapidly among the schools here. So if our parents listen to these doctors and then do not vaccinate their children, what will happen? If this Delta variant gets out of control, some children will end up in ICU. And I just wonder, who will be responsible then? Now, our government has to be responsible and act in the best interest to protect our children. So I think this is the point about this whole issue. And in fact, many countries are starting to vaccinate their children once they realize that outbreaks can occur among children. US has started. Israel, who initially was reluctant, now that they have seen school outbreaks with the Delta variant, they started vaccinating their children. So what we are doing in Singapore is not really too unusual. It's because of the situation that we need to protect our children in the face of this more transmissible variant that can cause more severe disease.
The assessment of the expert committee on vaccination is that the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks, like what you mentioned as well. Now, so far, 4 of the 6 cases of myocarditis and pericarditis among people vaccinated here involved men between 18 and 30 years old. Professor, at what point should the public be concerned?
So this is the point where I think we need to remind people about stringent regulatory controls. All doctors have to report serious complications after vaccination, whether we feel it is related or not related to COVID, to HSA. HSA continuously monitor this data and reviewed it and notified MOH. Now, this is exactly what happens. This is how we came about to know this, because this is exactly what happened in the US. The doctors reported it, US CDC reviewed it, and then shared with everyone. We attended the meeting on the 23rd of June. So this is how we can pick up safety signals. And at this stage, as we shared on the 11th of June, there is a very, very slight increase in risk. But the benefit, as I mentioned above, far outweighs the risk. Now, obviously, this is an ongoing process. I think we should have faith and trust in HSA and MOH. There's no reason why the government will compromise the safety of our children, because our children are our future.
Great points there, Professor Lai. Thank you so much for your time. I've been speaking with infectious diseases specialist, Associate Professor David Lai. On to the latest COVID-19 figures here. There were 4 new cases in the community today. All of them linked to previous cases and were already quarantined. 5 other cases today were imported, 2 being returning Singaporeans or PRs. Now, more details will be released tonight. More COVID-19 testing operations are underway in the Bukit Merah and Red Hill areas today. This follows the Health Ministry's announcement last night that 4 residents from 3 households in Block 103 Anderson Crescent tested positive. Testing is conducted in the pavilion at 104B Anderson Crescent today and tomorrow between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Meanwhile, about a 12-minute walk away, another swabbing operation is also underway at LENGKOK, BAHRU. MOH said last night that viral fragments were detected in wastewater samples from blocks 55, 56 and 57. Investigations are ongoing to determine linkages and the source of transmission. Testing is compulsory for all residents, shop owners and staff there. As at last night, there are 12 cases linked to the Anderson Crescent cluster and 91 to the Bukit Merah View 1. For a closer look, I'm joined by Professor Dale Fisher, an infectious diseases expert from the National University of Singapore's Yong Loo Lin School of Medicine. Now, Professor also chairs the National Infection Prevention and Control Committee. Welcome back to the show, Professor. Let's talk about the largest cluster in Singapore, the 115 Bukit Merah View Market and Food Centre. It has over 90 cases. Now, comparing with the other clusters that we've seen, Professor, so far, like the one at Changi Airport and GEM Westgate, what does this cluster tell us?
Thanks, Haryanto. I think what it tells us is that these clusters are getting harder to control. I think in times gone by, this could have been controlled with conventional sort of contact tracing, quarantining of contacts, isolating of contacts, isolating of cases, sorry. But now what we're seeing is with this Delta variant that it's obviously a lot more infective, and there's good evidence, good epidemiologic evidence for that. But it's also confounded by the fact that vaccinated people have very mild or asymptomatic disease. So what you can do is get an asymptomatic person, maybe unrecognized, could give it to somebody else, could give it to somebody else, and then it appears, and now it's a new cluster because it's not sort of linked. So what we're seeing with these new clusters appearing apparently out of the blue, and in fact unlinked cases on a daily basis, we didn't see these before, but that's because of these different factors, such as the Delta variant, and also the fact that we've got a good percentage of the population vaccinated. It's kind of a good problem, actually, Haryanto. But what we can do is we can also see what the future is going to look like, and that is that transmission will be largely silent through the community or have mild disease, and really only the unvaccinated people will be the ones getting sick.
Right. Professor, daily case numbers in the community now recently, though stabilizing, have remained in the low double digits, and there continues to be unlinked cases among them, like you mentioned earlier on as well. Will we see these numbers eventually dipping with more mass testing exercises being carried out to sieve out and ring-fence possible infections?
Yeah, I don't, you see, we could make all the cases go away. We could have another lockdown or circuit breaker or whatever, really increase those social restrictions, but that's not the direction we want to go. That's just not fair on people's businesses and weddings and all these types of things. So we want to be able to open up. Now, that will be enabled by vaccination eventually, but actually we're not there yet. So we're trying to balance this controlling the disease without increasing the social restrictions, while we, if you like, race to that endpoint by getting everybody vaccinated. So contact tracing, because of the unlinked cases, you can see contact tracing can get many of the cases, some days most of the cases, but actually not all of the cases. So I don't think it'll go away without increased social restrictions, and nobody wants that. So I think if we rumble along like this as we keep getting vaccinated, that has to be the strategy.
So, Prof, are you saying then that these are numbers that Singapore can expect moving forward?
Yeah, and until we stop counting them, I think it's quite likely because as I said, there's so many silent cases, and then new clusters can appear. There's so many unlinked cases and people diagnosed that weren't actually in quarantine. So therefore you can presume there's been some more spread of this Delta variant. So I think we can expect to see these types of numbers. And as has been mentioned, we'll be tracking the more severe cases because they'll actually be the one that matters. We'll eventually get sick of just counting, another dozen asymptomatic people, because even if and when they spread it, if they spread it to more vaccinated people, then those people aren't going to get sick either. Let me just tell you, in the last 2 months, there's been about 900 cases of COVID diagnosed. Now, 70 of those people became sick and 6 have died. But let me tell you, of the nearly 200 that were vaccinated, only 2 of them needed oxygen. None of them went to ICU and none died. All the deaths and almost all of the sick people, and certainly all the ICU patients, were not fully vaccinated. The evidence is clear from the trials. It's clear from our Singapore data now that it's frankly becoming irresponsible not to be vaccinated, because we can see the disease is going to become endemic. It's going to spread. If you're not vaccinated, you're just taking a risk.
All right. Looking forward, Singapore is preparing to live with COVID-19 as an endemic disease, and that will include doing away with massive contact tracing and, like you mentioned as well, tracking only hospitalized cases or just the severe cases. So, Professor, when and how would that shift take place?
So yeah, eventually we will have to let it run in the community, but we certainly want to see most people vaccinated. I don't think herd immunity is what it's all about. It's more about giving people the opportunity to protect themselves, because we know vaccinated people can still get the disease and can still spread the disease. So we're not actually stopping transmission completely. I think it could happen by the end of the year. I think there'll be steps. I think the government will, they're not just going to say one day it's over, let's let it run. It'll be less mask wearing, perhaps less mask wearing outside. Maybe we'll open the borders for people that are vaccinated. They can do less quarantine, things like that. So I think it'll be gradual, but I think we're going to see potentially see some exciting things over the next 6 months.
As always, thank you for your insights, Professor. That was infectious diseases expert from the NUS's Yong Loo Lin School of Medicine, Professor Dale Fisher. Meanwhile, Changi General Hospital says it's experiencing high call volume to make change or cancel appointments. That's after 5 more COVID-19 cases reported on Sunday were linked to the cluster as CGH. Multimedia journalist Renee Po was at the hospital today and filed this report.
It was very mundane, like as usual. So there wasn't any advanced measures taken.
I feel like today at the pharmacy there was quite a lot of people.
They behave very normally. If you try to be cautious, then people get anxious and worried.
Business as usual. That's how patients and visitors to Changi General Hospital described the situation on the ground after the cluster grew to 10 people as of Sunday, June 27th. 8 of them are staff members. I'm here outside the general wards at Changi General Hospital, where patients are still able to receive 1 pre-registered visitor a day. And the guidelines remain at 1 pre-registered visitor throughout the duration of each patient's admission. At lunchtime, the main building was a bustle of activity with a steady stream of patients and visitors entering. It was also an orderly scene at the Accident and Emergency Department, or A&E, with patients registering and waiting for their turn. Most people I spoke to said that they felt safe to go ahead with their hospital visits or medical appointments and were taking their own safety precautions.
I'm not really too concerned with the hospital being too infectious on the ground. I mean, I am still concerned about the COVID situation. I put on some hand sanitizer. But other than that, other than the normal safety measures, I feel like we're really quite safe as of now.
Today I go to physiotherapist because here highly secure.
Yeah, then my mom was a bit worried. Then we actually almost wanted to change the appointment, but I think anywhere we go, the exposure is still there, so I think it's fine lah. Then I just went ahead. We tried to stand away from other people.
The hospital said on its Facebook page that it's also taking precautionary measures with contact tracing and ongoing surveillance swab tests. Staff who have been in close contact with COVID-19 positive cases have been placed on quarantine orders or leave of absence. Only patients identified as contacts may be placed in isolation to recover and will not be able to receive visitors. Those who come for outpatient appointments can continue to do so. Meanwhile, visitors to the general ward are advised to observe safe management measures and to minimize their interactions with other patients or visitors at the hospital. Renee Po for the Straits Times.
In other headlines, Singaporean businessman Ng Yew Chi, who is alleged to be linked to a $1 billion fraud scheme, was handed 13 new charges today, including fraudulent trading and criminal breach of trust involving more than $200 million. He had allegedly cheated several notable lawyers millions, including a general counsel for Temasek International, Peck Siok Lan, the president of the Association of Criminal Lawyers of Singapore, Sunil Sudisan, and ex-president of the Law Society, Teo Shen Yi. Ng currently faces a total of 31 charges and is expected to be back in court on July 5th for a bail review. According to survey findings by the Cybersecurity Agency, 37% of people here fell prey to cyber criminals last year, up from 28% in 2019. The agency said that while more people are aware of the dangers and consequences of cyber attack, they do not think they will be targets themselves. Meanwhile, CSA also found that nearly 8 in 10 here used two-factor authentication last year to secure their online banking accounts. But for other online accounts like messaging apps, WhatsApp and Telegram, shopping, personal email and social media, just half of them did so. This comes after earlier warnings by the authorities that criminals have been able to hack some online accounts, notably WhatsApp, that are not protected by 2FA. And so, to encourage better cyber practices and awarenesses of the threats, CSA today launched the Better Cyber Safe Than Sorry National Cybersecurity Awareness Campaign. Teaming up with the Shopee, Carousel and FairPrice, the campaign focuses on 4 areas, including using two-factor authentication to secure online accounts and learning how to spot signs of phishing. Looking overseas, a video footage of the Miami building collapse may offer insights into the possible failure point. Structural engineers said the failure could begin at a specific point in the lowest part of the condominium complex, possibly in or below the underground parking garage. Early examinations revealed that a gradual spread of failures could have occurred due to design flaws or the approval of less robust construction when the complex was built 40 years ago. 9 people have died from the collapse so far, while more than 150 people remained unaccounted for. Northwest US is facing one of its most extreme and prolonged heat waves in history. Over the weekend, all of Washington and Oregon and parts of Idaho and California were under an excessive heat warning when temperatures rose above 40 degrees Celsius. The National Weather Service said across the region, dozens of daily record high temperatures are expected to be set. Residents are urged to stay hydrated and to visit cooling centers if needed. Now those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman. Join me tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.